engineer and a visiting lecturer, with a master's degree in computer science specializing in software architecture from University of Moratuwa, a bachelor's degree in software engineering from Curtin, University of Australia, and an honor's degree in information technology specializing in software engineering from SLTC. Mr. Prasanna brings a strong academic background to the table. He is not only dedicated professional, but also actively involved in mentoring and making a positive impact in the community. His achievements extend beyond professional realm, and as he also excelled in the gaming world, winning awards such as gold medal in Sri Lankan Cyber Games 2014 and representing Sri Lanka in Pokemon Go PvP World Championship at Dortmund, Germany in 2019. Without any further delay, let's extend a warm virtual welcome to Mr. Prasanna Vaikunthavasan as he shares his expertise on building a strong CV and optimizing your LinkedIn profile. Mr. Prasanna, the stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kavindu, for this great introduction. Let me share the screen. Let me know if you can't hear me or see my screen clearly.
You're audible, sir.
Okay, and you can see my screen as well, right?
It's just sharing. We can see.
Okay, great. So welcome to a session. I think I've been already introduced well, but just to quickly recap, yes, I've been at 99X for the past 8 years, and I've been doing this CV or be the professional you want to be in the industry sessions for last 6 years in various universities. So my idea today is to kind of give you a guide or what you can do to stand out and be the best version of you in the professional world, right? And how you can craft your CVs, what are the best practices you can do, what are the mistakes, and also I'll touch upon LinkedIn and also interviews as well in this session. So my plan is to take the next 30 to 40 minutes to go through my slide deck, right? And if you have any questions, you can ask in a Q&A at the end of the session. But of course, you can always drop in the chat in the chat box, either to me or to everyone, where I will take up the questions at the end. So moving on, I will be starting off with the main difference when it comes to these CVs and resumes, right? So resumes is kind of mainly when you are working to abroad, right? So in Sri Lankan context, we always consider it as a CV. So at the end of your career or at the end of your academic career, when you're done studying, everyone is going to go and find jobs, right? So that is kind of the main purpose. We are studying right now to apply ourselves and get the expertise which we learned into a practical scenario. So when we do this, of course, in Sri Lanka context, the first thing you are going to be presented with or you have to present with is your CV. But in international standards or even in some companies who have kind of international branch, right? In some companies in Sri Lanka, they involve something called as a resume. Right, so sometimes when especially the freshers who comes out of universities get a little confused when people ask for a resume, right? Even if people ask for a CV. So the main difference I want to start off with the presentation today is the resume is just one page, right? Where the CV, what we normally send can be up to 2 to 3 pages. So of course, CVs can even go to 20 pages depending on the requirement of what we're applying. But mainly the CVs are a couple of pages where a resume is just one minimal page. So one example on the internet is about Marisa, who was an ex-Yahoo CEO until 2017. And this is kind of the example I've been showing throughout ever since I've done this session, because how it is being presented out. So you can see that the formatting, the visual representation, and the skills of her profile, everything has been presented in a way which is very unique and very creative as well. And of course, it's kind of good to see in the eye. So I hope at the end of this session, the main goal of at least my presentation is to give you all kind of tips and kind of make you all create CVs in a way which looks very presentable, right? So of course, you can't put everything in one page, right? You have to create a CV of 2 to 3 pages, but creating a profile where you can have the most important information you all need. So in this example, you can see all what she does in a day of her life, the education, the languages, and you can see some visual representation. like pie charts, like progress bars for languages to show which one is she's most expertise in. And if the reader is interested, they can then focus on the small text, right? So on the high level, on the bigger text is kind of a profile. And if the person is interested, for example, what she did in Yahoo, what she did in Google, then they can go into and read the little tiny text to find out more information. So starting off with the two differences between the CV and the resume is CV is where you kind of put all your experiences and the accomplishments. So we will go through what to have in your CV and what not to have in your CV. Those are kind of the two main topics I'll be covering today, other than your LinkedIn profile and preparing you all for interviews. But just to start off, the resume is where you only have your highlights, right? So of course you can't have everything if you want to put it in one page. So don't just reduce the font and try to put everything what you have in the CV in a small way into one page to a resume. Of course, it won't give a pleasant experience. So the main purpose of a resume is that the employers don't have much time. They just want to see a quick glance of your profile. And if that interests, they will probably ask you for a CV or to send more information about you. So you have few categories or topics which we will go one by one in the next slide. And I told you the length is in a resume is normally always a one page. And CVs in Sri Lanka, at least we get about 2 to 3 pages, but as requirement, it can even go to 30 pages for a seasoned professional. A CV is what gives you a full history of what you have been doing, where resume just give you a small sample profile. So either it's CV or it's a resume. There's a golden rule when it comes to creating one. And that is you should be able to discuss everything you have written there in detail. So since I've been into recruitment at 99X and been seeing a lot of CVs and how they've been crafted. So the freshers or the new people who come to the industry think that they need to kind of showcase themselves in a CV. So don't write things which you don't know. So that is kind of the golden rule, right? Because what the CV or your resume is just something for us to have a conversation with you when you come in for an interview as the next step. So if you are shortlisted, when you are called upon the interview, your CV is the document which we are going to go through and have a conversation with you. So if you can't talk back on the things, or if you have kind of not been truthful about the things you have mentioned there, so the first impression itself with your own integrity will not be kind of a good experience. So you don't need to kind of put a lot of things in your CV, especially the freshers who come to the industry. We don't expect you all to know A to Z in the IT or a tech field. So I'm talking about tech because I'm from tech, but this applies to any of the fields you are going to apply. So the first golden rule is you need to be able to kind of talk about what you have put in your CV. So just don't probably listen to one of the latest trending topic in the technology programming, right? Let's say something like React Native, and you just Google what React Native is, right? And you write maybe just a hello world app, or just look at a YouTube video sample. And in your CV, you put expertise in React Native, which gives the wrong information to us. Because when we have a conversation, we are going to go inside the concepts of React Native and you won't be able to answer. So that is where the visualization of the progress bar comes into place, right? So you can kind of grade yourself in different technology, right? So nobody knows all the technology in the world, especially in the IT world. Nobody kind of knows all the technology. So as an employers or the recruiters, we understand, but we want you to be truthful and tell us what you have worked with. So when I talk about what are the things to include, I will probably go into the next few slides. So what to have in your CV or a resume, right? Here it says resume, but at the end of the day, it's the topics should be the same. And as I mentioned before, it's a unique document of yourself. So another thing is, especially, so these scenarios I'm talking especially with the freshers, is few of the friends in a group or who hangs out together has the same template. So one person does the CV and everyone takes a copy and kind of edits the name. And if they have worked in their same project, they might not even change the project details. So this is kind of a red flag when it comes to the recruiters, when they see the same thing kind of being repeated over and over again. So your CV should be a unique and creative craft of your own. So to create that document, there are a few things which you need to have, a few sections which you need to have in your CV. So I think if you have already created your CV, I'm not sure whether you have all have created a CV, but even if you have seen a CV or if you just Google a sample CV, most of the CVs you will have this section, because these are kind of the main points what the recruiter or the hiring manager look for when they are going through your document. So the first one is the obvious one on top page, or on the first line of the page in the center. You will have your full name, right? And you will have a contact information. So of course, it's pretty straightforward about your full name, right? But the contact information, there are a couple of things. So the first one is make sure you provide your phone number, which correctly, and your updated one. There are scenarios in our experience where the candidate is really good. We selected them, but we call the candidate, it's a wrong number or the phone number doesn't work. So the hiring manager does not go behind finding the contact number of the candidate. They kind of just ignore from that step. And when you give the email address as well, it's always make sure you check the email address, whether it's correct. And I think it does not applicable for you all as a students, but let's say down the line, right? So CVs are not the documents you create now, right? Even 10 years down the line, after you work in a company, you always have to keep your CV updated. So let's say down the line, after 10 years, you're applying for another job. You're moving from one company to another company. It's a good kind of an etiquette, right? It's a professional way not to include your previous company email in your contact information. Always include your personal email. So it is just one good professional etiquette when it comes to adding your email and also your phone numbers. So the next one is objective or summary statement, which is one of the key points or kind of something which the recruiter first looks at to find your background. So I mentioned that it's an XOR function. So if you are coming from kind of gates and if you have learned those, you know that the XOR means that you have to have one of these, not both. Some students have both thinking, more the better, but actually you need to have one, whether it's an objective or a summary statement. So in my experience, this is the section which kind of confuses the freshers or the students who are coming from the universities to the industry. So I have few sample objective and summary statement, the goods and the bads in the next few slides. And the next one is your education, right? So you can mention where you're from, or not where you're from, where you studied, right? From your school and from your university. And if you have not completed your degree, you can put it as present or reading, meaning that you are still have not completed with the year of completion, so that we know when you will be done with your studies. And there are some good practices like order it in the recent timeline way, meaning your recent education first. So for both education and work experience or work history, you need to have a timeline where you can kind of order them by the recent first. So for example, in education, you can have your university first and then your school. And in the middle, if you have done some other diplomas or certifications or anything, you can have them in that order. And when it comes to experience or work history, one of the common questions in past session is, we are university students, we don't have work history. So this is where you talk about your projects you have worked with. So in your academic career, you have worked with different technologies and projects, right? So I'm talking with tech, but depending on what your domain is, in whatever it is, you have worked with something small in your university. So mention that and always mention your individual contribution. So if it's not an individual project, if it's a group project, don't just talk about the project. So we don't want to know the project what you have worked on. We want to know what you have done in your project, what your skill set is. So if your group project, of course, have to be divided individually. So in your contribution, what are the technologies you have worked with, your experience, everything you can mention here. And of course, the most important one for us when it comes to a tech company is the technical skills. So this is again where I'm saying not the things you heard about, right? The technologies you have worked with. So you don't have to go in depth to work, or you don't have to know everything about the technology to put on your CV, but you also should not put the technologies you just heard from a friend in your CV because you just heard it, right? So you need to have some experience. You need to have at least the basic concepts of those technologies mentioned in your CV. So these are the 5 sections, right? We will go into one by one now into how you can craft your best CV after this session. So I mentioned we have some objective and summary statement. So just to quickly give the difference between them before I go with some examples is, so objective and summary statement both kind of tells about you. So this is where you kind of say what you want, right? So CVs are not always about telling what they want, right? For what they are looking for. It's also about what you want. So here you can say about what backend programming, front-end programming, or you want, let's say the company, I'm taking just examples here, right? Let's say you're applying for Dialog and they have different branches. Let's say you want to be in a branch close to your house. So you can mention the region and location as well. So if you mention something like few lines, 2 to 3 lines, right? So specifically like one kind of a small objective statement that will have few lines. Whereas a summary statement will have a small paragraph where you can go a little more information. But that does not mean a summary statement is advantageous to objective. It's just what serves your purpose. So the first example here is an objective which says to obtain a job where I can use my skills and stuff and work in a challenging problem. So this objective looks good on paper, but this is the common objective you will get if you Google, give me an objective, or you put into ChatGPT asking, give me a best objective to put on my CV. ChatGPT most of the time returns something like this. This tells me nothing individually about you. It looks very vague and very common. So this is one of a bad example, even though it looks good to read on paper, it's kind of a bad example when it comes to giving an objective on the CV. So as I mentioned, when you are mentioning objective, talk about the position you want. If you really like into backend, or if you really like into Node.js programming, talk about that. You're passionate about that. And I want to learn more and get into projects on that technology. Talk about the area. Let's say you want to work in this branch, or you want to work on this full-time role or a part-time role. So it's up to you, but make it a unique for you. Don't just put a common objective like what everyone puts, like I want to just use my skills and experience and solve problems for you and work in a team environment. You just have to make your CV more and more unique to yourself. Same way, few examples, summary statement as well, right? So it's just make it about you, and the summary statement most of the case will have more lines. So that is kind of your main objective. So don't be someone from the internet or someone who's copy pasting from somebody else's CV or as an example. Just tell the employer what you are uniquely for them. So there are a few other examples of objective and summary statements, but I think the main idea here is you kind of talk about what you want and what you are looking for and have them in a order there. So the next topic after personal information and objective statement or summary statement is your education and then your work experience. These are kind of the heart of your CV, including with the technical skills, right? So this is what is going to define your CV for us to kind of get an idea what you have worked with. So with your education and work experience, so of course, if you're a student, you have not worked before, it's only going to be your education and projects. But if you have worked with other companies, let's say you are down the line 10 years after you got your job, you're creating a new CV to apply to another place or to migrate, and you're creating a CV to apply to an international place. What you do here is either work experience or education, as I mentioned, it needs to be in the order of the recent timeline. What you have done latest should be mentioned first, and then you go in an order. So what the main purpose is, let's say I'm reading your CV. When I go through that order, I kind of get a full timeline of your life, right? I will say, okay, you studied in this school, then you went to this university, then you started working here. So it's kind of gives the reader a good experience as well. Always have qualifications. So my advice when I do this session is don't only depend on the degree or your qualification you get from the university. Right now in the industry, there are so many opportunities, right? There are certification, there are online certification, there are hackathons, there are competitions, you name it. There are so many opportunities out there where you can stand out from the competition. So your goal should be when you graduate, you are not the only one, or you're not even the first 100 who are graduating. If you take around at that particular time at your career fair, there'll be so many universities, there's so much of competition for you all to get into your dream job. So always make sure you'll stand out, meaning do extracurricular activities, hackathons to competitions, and you can include them in your CV, right? So if you get some certificates, always mention as a good practice which year you get the certificate. So one example is, let's say you got a Microsoft certificate developer. Let's say you got it in 2005. If you don't mention the year, we would assume that you have the latest one, right? Because they kind of update their certification every 2 years as well. And once you get a certificate, most of the time it has an expiry date. For Microsoft Azure or those examples, it's normally 2 years. After 2 years, your certificate is expired. You need to kind of update your knowledge and take the certification again. Of course, that's free of charge because you're just updating. So always mention which year you have done the certification, right? Don't just mention the name of the certification. One other thing, always mention your grades, right? So if you don't mention your grades, it's an assumption that you don't have good grades, right? So people sometimes assume only if I have the first class or 4.0 GPA, you need to mention the grades, right? When you come to industry, you'll realize that the classes and the GPA and the tops, of course, they are good, but they are not the only thing that matters. Even if you have the second class, upper, lower, mention your grades, right? So if you don't mention it, they are going to assume that your grades are poor. That's why you have not mentioned. And when you are mentioning your university, do not use abbreviation, right? What I mean is I think for y'all, it's SLTC, if I'm not mistaken, right? So this example, don't put UOM for University of Moratuwa. Always write your full university name, right? You have no idea who's going to read it, if it's a local person or an international person. Mention when you started it, mention which year you finished it. Let's say you're still doing it, mention you are currently doing it as present or reading, meaning that you're still doing it. Then you can mention the year which you are planning to finish it. So the other one is, do not miss any of your small certification or education as well, since this will be your CV, right? So we have come across people, when we call upon to interview, they say that they have completed this certification in Udemy or some online site. But then when we ask why you have not put on the CV, they just didn't think through that will make a big value. So always make sure you focus on your education, work experience, and the technical skills, right? Because this is what makes the heart of the CV, where people look for your profile. And of course, when it comes to professional qualification, right, always include the relevant one, right? So don't go to an IT tech company and include your award at probably a cooking competition, what you have done in school. So you made a salad and you won an award in a cooking competition. Don't include that in a IT CV, right? It means that you kind of ran out of things to include, so you just included it. So always include relevant things. So not only IT, let's say you go for another kind of a domain area, include the things which are relevant to them. Don't include things just to fill a piece of paper. So it's not about, so the common misconception is people think, let's say they just compare, right? So you compare your CV with your friend and you see your friend has about 5 pages of full both back and forth, both the sides, and you have about 2 pages. That doesn't mean your CV is less than your friends. So it's always not about what you or how much you include. It's only about what and the depth of the things you include in your CV. As I mentioned, include the relevant and the achievement. The latest one comes first, and always mention the date. So the good and the bad awards, as I mentioned, the technical ones, you can include all the ones related to technical and not things like any salad competition or things which does not resolve around that domain. The next, technical skills, right? So again, you need to be very accurate with your technical skills. Of course, if you have worked with projects, and you can include those technical skills. If you have created side projects, if you have worked with projects on your own to learn the technology, you can include them. Since when you're learning, you will not just learn what the technology is, right? You'll get hands-on experience and learn the concepts. One of my tip here is to, similar to what I showed you at the start, kind of have a progress bar. Rate yourself out of 5 in all the technologies. Let's say in C#, so you can't be the same in all the technologies. The ones common, I'm just taking a few examples. Let's say Java or C#, rate 5 out of 5. And in JavaScript or TypeScript, rate 3 out of 5. So that gives us an idea how you rate yourself and how you are comfortable with that programming language. So rather than just putting in a list of all the programming language from top to the bottom, rate yourself. It can be even like a beginner, advanced, or an expert as well. And I added this point because it always comes up in session. Students ask, since they take part in a lot of volunteer activities with UN or any clubs in the university. You can include them as your extracurricular activities when it comes to your CV. So next is kind of a hack, or not exactly a hack. It's just kind of a tip when it comes to applying to a place where you are kind of wanting to for a long time. So up to now, you know how to create a common CV, right? So now you know what are the sections of the CV, and now you know a 2 to 3 pages, a common CV. Let's say you have been kind of eyeing a company. Okay, so I'm taking an example, the 99X, you've been eyeing 99X or any company to work for. So the first kind of thing which you should be doing is kind of going through the job adverts, right? So if you go to the LinkedIn profile, I will talk about LinkedIn at the end, but just to, since I mentioned it now, it's just your virtual or an online CV, right? It's just like your social media, not a social media, but just like the same way, a professional place for you to connect with and network with your peers. So there you can find 99X and look at the advertisement. You can look at all the other, even in social medias from Facebook, where they put adverts. So you kind of know what they are looking for, right? So then you can use this trick of keywords to create a separate CV for them to kind of impress and get the job, right? So this is kind of a small trick from the experience, how you can apply for a particular company. So when you look at the job advert, you can always note down few keywords. That's why it's called as the trick of keywords. So when you look at, for this example, they are looking for a marketing manager, and there are a few keywords that they need to do, like coordinate marketing campaigns, lead generate campaigns, and what they are looking for is for an enterprise application. So these are keywords. The more you do it, I think with experience, the more you will be kind of professional with it when it's crafting for a target company. So what you do is, in your CV, of course, you don't have to lie about it if you don't do it, but if you have actually done them, mention those keywords in your CV. So it's kind of a reverse psychology, right? So the recruiter who put the advert knows these keywords. And when they see these keywords in your CV, they kind of feel pleasant that this candidate is what we are looking for. But what you are doing is the reverse psychology, where you are targeting a company and kind of putting yourself out only if you are, of course, comfortable with those things, right? So let's say you have worked with a marketing campaign and you have never worked in the past. I'm not asking you to lie and put on your CV, I have worked with a marketing campaign, just to get the job. What I'm saying is, sometimes when we have a common CV, we won't put these keywords, right? So we won't put this, for example, something to work with enterprise application in a common CV. But let's say for my example, you are applying for a marketing manager in 99X, right? And they have these keywords and you have those expertise, you can explicitly mention as your skills and what you have done. So the reader who is reading this knows that this profile fits my requirement, because they have put those keywords in their job advert, and that is exactly what you are looking for. So this is just a quick kind of a small usage of keywords, where you can scan a job advert, find the keywords, and then mention them in your CV, right? And then kind of have a competitive advantage when it comes to the hiring process. So before I wind up with what to do with your CV, the last one is always make sure the person is spending some valuable resource they have to go through your CV, which is their time, right? So they are spending some time to go through your CV. So do everything in your practice to structure it, make it consistent, make it clean, make it presentable. So make it easy for them to read. Don't clutter things on your CV, right? If the hiring manager is having a hard day going through 100 CVs, of course, when he sees a clutter, he's just going to read your name and then put the CV away. So do what you can to make the CV look presentable, and always keep in mind, right? So there's someone else who's spending their valuable time, 10 to 15 minutes at least, to go through 2 to 3 pages of your profile. So we learned about what to do in your CV, and now we will quickly jump into what not to do. I think these are all very, very common ones, but I have to mention, because still this year we have seen here and there few freshers or few students making these common mistakes. So I'll tell you the two common one, the grammar and the spelling mistakes, right? That will put off your CV when you have some grammatical or spelling mistake. Use online tools like Grammarly, right? So if you are not very fluent with English and if you need some support, use these tools. And the other one is, regardless of the tools, you can always use what we use the old way, right? Give your CV at least to your family members. Ask them to read it, tell them to give you improvement. Share your CV with your friends, right? It's always good to network, right? You should not be like, you can't share your CV because that person is going to copy. So of course, if they copy, then that will be an issue, but you need to create a network where you're kind of growing together in the university. So share with your friends, tell them to give you feedback. More people who gives you feedback, more spelling and grammatical mistakes you will kind of evade. And of course, if you want to go through the technical world, there are so many tools online, right? Always one example is Grammarly, but there are so many tools. Make sure you don't have any grammar or spelling mistakes. And also, as I think I already mentioned, always double check your CV. Don't miss any important details. One thing is your grades, your GPA, students have missed. Some certification you have done, but you have no idea, right? Just check, go through your email you have registered, check all the certificates you have, and update your CV. So now you have a CV, right? So let's hope that you got something out of the session, and now you have a document, a Word document, right? Normally of 3 pages, you have put something here and there, and now you have a CV. Now, before you package it, I just wanted to have another common question. So these are few common questions I'm answering here and there because it's been asked in a previous session, is whether to have your photograph in your CV. So if you ask me, I would say, if you are in a position to place a photograph, a small one on the right top, go ahead and place it. But if you don't place it, don't feel gutted or you feel bad about your CV that it doesn't have a photograph and you have sent it without a photograph. Let's say you forgot to add a photograph and you have sent it. Because having a photograph is not mandatory. It's a personal preference, right? I would recommend, if you all can, just have a small one on the top right, right? Normal CV formatting, it's on the top right. Yeah, you have your latest professional looking photograph, not the selfies you took at the parties which are on Facebook. The photographs needs to be a little professional and it needs to kind of represent a professional version of you. If you don't have a photograph, you can skip the photograph on your CV. And the next main thing is convert it to a PDF. It takes a couple of seconds to go to Google and say Word doc to PDF. Don't send Word doc. It's not professional in the industry. Always convert your CV to a PDF file and rename it appropriately. Don't just send my CV version 3033.pdf to us. The good practice is always put your name, right? And call it a CV or a resume and put an year. I told you that this is not a document which you will create now, get a job and throw it away. CV is something you will always keep updating in your life, right? So always mention a year. So down the line, when you want to update it, you can save it as a different year. Then you can kind of even compare your CV. And the next one in your packaging is your cover letter. So in CVs, we kind of have 2 to 3 pages. So you don't need to explicitly send a cover letter. But let's say you have been requested to send a resume, which is a 1 page. So of course, I told you, you can't put everything in the 1 page. So what you can do is, with your 1 page resume, you can send them another cover letter. So this is like you telling them, so this is my profile, the short version. If you are interested, you can read my cover letter as well. So if they are interested in you only, they will be having a look into your cover letter. So it's just nothing but you talking about what you are looking for in the job, your strengths, weaknesses, and thanking them for taking the time. Right? So you should not depend on your cover letter. Right? What I meant by depend on your cover letter is there's no 100% guarantee that they're going to read it. So on CVs, you don't send a cover letter normally, right? You can send it, but it's the common scenario is when it comes to resume. Since you are only sending 1 page with your highlights, the others you can kind of mention it in a letter. And if they're interested only, they will go through it. So here you can talk about what you're looking from the company and why are you kind of interested, right? Even when it comes to Sri Lanka, Colombo, so many IT companies are there. So why are you interested in joining WSO2? Why are you interested in joining 99X? So why are you interested in joining this place? So you can talk about your strengths, weaknesses, and things like this. And as a good practice on the cover letter, it's always good to mention your availability for interviews, right? So if you are chosen, it looks professional that you have mentioned your interview slots available. So they don't have to call and ask you for a free slot. And always, regardless of whatever you do, you should thank the person who is reading it because they took their time and went through your profile. So just some good and bad example. I think the bad one is pretty obvious. The timeline is wrong. The way it's marked is wrong, right? So you have to kind of describe more about your projects. So in the bad one, you can see it just says IT support assistant. So here you have to mention what your individual role is. So this is kind of a good and the bad CV example. And before we move into the online CV, the LinkedIn, I want to mention about referees in the CV. So if you have not heard, you can add referees to your CVs as well. So this is where you will add people who have professionally worked with you as a referee in your CV. So you can see the bad CV example at the bottom, there's a reference added, right? So you add their name, where you have worked them with, their contact email. So the main purpose for us employers is we will give them a call and ask about whether you have done few things you have mentioned in the CV. So it's pretty obvious you need to give them a small heads up, right, before you put them as a referees. There are scenarios where students have put their lecturers, they have spoken to universities as referees. And apparently the lecturer doesn't even remember the student. So it's going to be an awkward conversation when I call from 99X to your lecturer and ask, for example, person A, how was he in your university? He has mentioned you as a referee. And the lecturer says he didn't even ask me. I don't know this about the student, and the student has just mentioned me. So that itself is a very negative flag. You can't mention your friends and family as well in your referee, right? So for students, what I would suggest is go talk to your supervisor you have worked in your project. We all have worked in project in universities, right? Not the friends in your project, your supervisors in your project. Be polite and send them an email or ask their permission to be a referee. In my experience, since I was being a lecturer as well, we would be happy to have us in your referee if we have worked with you closely and we can vouch for you. So that will make sure you have a good referee point in your CV. So for students, you can get your referee from your university lecturers, right? But when you are come to the industry, it will be your supervisor at work. So in my case, it will be the supervisor I'm working at 99X. I will have as a referee. In the future, if someone wants to see my experience, they will call that person, he or she, and get some information about me. First thing is having a referee is really good, right? And the second thing is for your students, go to your supervisor, ask them, get their permission and put them. And if you have other industry experience, let's say you work with a project in another company when you are studying, talk to the project lead, ask them. Most of the time, if you ask people, they will be happy to give their details to have as a referee in your CV. So I will move into the last two sections. I think these two are added new. So the first one is I'll quickly jump into LinkedIn. So if you have not already, I would highly suggest before you create a CV, just sign up for LinkedIn by going to linkedin.com. Right. So this is one of a very, very huge kind of a tool when it comes to hiring and showcasing your profile. If you have already created LinkedIn, then you know what I'm talking about. But there are a few things I just wanted to quickly mention, which we saw as the good and the bad parts of LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is, if you create your CV, if you have already have all the information you need to put to your LinkedIn, you just have to type everything in your CV into your profile in LinkedIn. So it is created in the same way. So you have your name and your contact information, then your education, work experience, tech skills. It's just your CV in an online world. First thing I would tell you is have keywords in your profile. Right. So in your profile, when you go to LinkedIn, right. So if you, after you create and if you go through, play around with LinkedIn, you'll get some idea. Have some keywords specifically on your title, what your main technologies are, because the hiring managers will most probably will search with keywords like Python. They won't search with names or anything unless they know about you. Have keywords in your profile. There's an area where you can add your skills and keywords. Always have keywords. Always make sure you have a professional photo in your LinkedIn profile. So the same way I told you, you can't put your Facebook selfies or any other unprofessional photograph or group pictures as well. Don't put a group picture on your LinkedIn profile picture, right? So the hiring manager wants to know who you are, right? So make an individual professional photograph, right? Go to a studio, right? If you really want to get a good professional one, or I'm pretty sure a lot of phones can even take it if you ask your friend when you go for a professional outing. Next, one of the biggest tip I would give is, most of the time I see people, so when you create a profile in LinkedIn, you get a unique URL. So that is the URL you are going to share with everyone to see your profile. By default, it gives a random number created URL. So it will be www.linkedin.com/ABCD1234, some random numbers. But if you go to your account settings, you can customize that URL. So if you go to linkedin.com/PrasannaVasan, you can see my profile. Same way, customize it to your name, right? So don't keep, so some people does not know about this change. So you can just go to your account settings in your LinkedIn and get a customized URL. Instead of some random numbers, put your full name or your name with initial. So that unique URL makes sense when you share to others. And the main rule of thumb is, be professional in LinkedIn. Don't share the gossips, political stuff, or all the day-to-day activities what you share, because you have Facebook and so many social media for those. Treat LinkedIn as what you would want people in hiring companies to see. For example, the main thing I can say is, make sure whatever you put on your LinkedIn, your university supervisor is reading. So you know what to share and what not to share. Be professional. Don't talk about gossips or political stuff. Talk about the technology you learned. One of a good tip I would give you is start writing your own blogs. Everything you learn is always, documentation is a very, very good habit when it comes to tech industry. So document the things you learn in blogs. You might not have you might not have any readers. Nobody's going to care about your blog. Nobody's going to read. But you will find the value later in 2 to 3 years when you look back of all the things you have documented. So the tip is, when you document a blog, let's say in Medium, you can put the link and create a post in LinkedIn saying, I learned this today. So this is what I learned. So people who read that will be inspired, will be kind of looking good on you, that you're kind of continuously learning and having a professional aspect of you as well. So these are few tips, right? These are not the only tips. There are so many things you can do in LinkedIn, right? But when you create your CV first, so you have your starting point, create your LinkedIn account, do all these good stuff, and then kind of convert from your CV to your LinkedIn. And of course, as I told you, this is not something you're going to just do now. This is something like, even now, 10 years down the line, since I've been in the industry, I update both my CV and the LinkedIn periodically. And my last slide, this is something I think I'm doing for the first time since now post-COVID, but since still the interviews, most of the interviews for you all are done online. Right, so this was more prominent during COVID, but even now, a lot of tech companies are adapted to working from home. So most of the time, at least the first interview, they won't ask you to come to office. They will ask you to they'll send you an email with some information to join. So quick few things before I wind up my session is on this interview, right? So interviews are kind of a precious situation, right? So even if tomorrow, if I'm going to an interview, I'll be nervous today. Right, so it's kind of normal. So accepting its interviews are normal is kind of the first step. Right, so interviews are there to be comfortable and talk about what you have done. So if you remember, I talk about not putting things on the CV which you don't want to mention. Right, so interviews are things which you need to kind of put forward in a way where you're going to go there and talk about yourself and what you have done. So in the CV, if you are being very truthful and you have mentioned everything in the CV what you want, then on the interviews, you will have less time being nervous, but a comfortable conversation. So quick thing is, always join the meeting link, right? So it can be Zoom, it can be Teams, it can be GoToMeeting, whatever it is, not 5 minutes before the session, right? Join 1 day before the session. Join and see whether your mic is getting connected, whether your mic is working, whether your webcam is working, whether you look good, whether the lighting is good. Do that 1 day before. Most of the scenarios, students joins 5 minutes and they're kind of setting up their laptops, their mic and the light, and then it kind of gives a bad impression because we are waiting. And then when you're comfortable with the tool, so it's just one Google search away to learn about the tool, right? When you're comfortable with the tool, always join at least 5 minutes before the meeting, right? Always join, be there on time, look in the camera, talk about what you have done. Always have a glass of water, right? So when we talk more things, we get a little choked up, right? When they keep on asking you, pressuring you with 100 questions and you start sweating. And then always have a glass of water, take a small break, take a breather, right? Pause yourself and just be honest about the things you know. So you don't have to answer all the questions. It is 100% normal in our day-to-day activities when we see people who pass a question saying that they have not worked with that technology. And always ask about what you want from the company as well. So we kind of treat interviews as a one-way street, right? So they bombard you with 100 questions. You just sit there and then you cut the call. Always talk about what your passions are, right? What the company can offer you. What are the technologies there in the company? I'm probably sure in any interview at the end, they're going to ask you if you have any questions. So use that time to learn about the company. So prepare for the interview. Look good. Yeah, I think that's a really important part. At least the top half of your body, make sure you look good, right? Be professional. Wear a shirt as you go to the interview, right? Make sure you have a professional attire. Make sure you look good, right? You don't have to have a professional camera. Just any camera in your laptop. Just get into a good lighting and look good and look at the camera, right? Some students kind of get nervous. They look down and talk. Always look at the camera. And if you are prepared with the tool and the techniques and what you have done on the CV, interviews, even though it's a kind of a nervous as it sounds, it'll be a good impression for you to make a distance when it's online. So I think, let me double check. Yes, that is all from me. If you have any questions or anything you want to know, I can answer. Someone has sent me on Zoom online courses. Just trying to read what you have sent. Okay, I think the question someone has sent me on Zoom is about your courses you do, which I think you are mentioning about some YouTube tutorials. So I don't think you can watch a YouTube tutorial and mention that as on a CV, but what you can do is learn something from a tutorial. Right, so you as a tutorial you can learn and then go into some online courses which they give certification or something as a result which you can mention in the CV. So don't just watch a YouTube video on React Native for 1 hour and mention on your CV, right? So learn the technology from YouTube or any platform, then go into the places where they give online certification. There are free ones as well as paid ones, right? So then you do the certification and then you can mention with your year. CV AI powered is kind of a hot topic right now. So talking about AI powered CV scanning, of course, a lot of companies do it, but most of the companies, at least from what I relate to, kind of have a manual scanning process as well, right? So when you have a graphical interface and the AI is scanning, of course, you are not in control of what is getting missed and what the information is. So the CV or the resume I showed about the Yahoo CEO is just an example, right? So it does not have to be a copy of that, but you can use graphical interface, right? So even if the progress bar is not picked up with the scanner, for example, which it should, at least at the end of the day, they will know what are the technical skills anyway. So you won't be losing anything by having a kind of a graphical interface when it comes to putting the CV. One more question on the chat. I think I have answered. It's about having a photo on your CV. I have mentioned that it's a personal preference, right? So if up to you, if you ask me, my personal preference is, of course, to have a photo on the top right. But it's totally up to you. There's no advantage you gain or disadvantage or something you lose by having a photo or not in your CV. But if you are having a photo, make sure it's a professional one. I think at least that's all the questions.
Sir, I do have a question, sir. Sir,
yeah.
when posting in LinkedIn, as you said, we should post professional things. What kind of professional things should we post? The things that certificates or the
So yeah,
projects we have
that's
done?
a good question. So the first thing is when you do a certification, 99% of the time they are going to be a LinkedIn share button in your certificate. So the first common thing is once you do a certificate, you can share your certificate in your LinkedIn. Second thing is it's not only about certification. So when you network and you work with people or talk to people in LinkedIn, you can create a lot of posts. Let's say, for example, I'm just taking .NET 8 is releasing in November 2023. So it's July 2023. But from the pre-releases, you can have, if you are, I'm just taking this as an example. If you're passionate about it, you can write your blog or you can read about it and you can do some write-up around it. So by the time it get actually released and people know that you've been very passionate in this project. So not only .NET, you can be Node, anything technical wise, even soft skills. You can talk about how soft skills like communication is important when it comes to industry. So there are posts which was you can done in the LinkedIn post.
Thank you, sir. If others have any questions, you can drop your questions in the chat box now.
Seems very okay. It's either they understood everything I told or nothing
Yeah,
makes
it
sense.
seems like they don't have any questions now, sir. Yeah, so we'll continue, sir. Thank you, Mr. Prasanna, for an insightful session that will undoubtedly help our participants navigate their career path. Before we wrap up, it's time to show our appreciation to you, Mr. Prasanna Wadhwanthavasan, for sharing his valuable insights and expertise with us today. Mr. Prasanna, we would like to present you with a digital token of appreciation as a small gesture of gratitude for your impactful session. Please accept this token, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me take a quick picture of it.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity. It was very good talking to, I think, more than 100 people. I hope it was helpful for you all as well, as much as I presented. And I wish everyone all the very best. And I hope to see some good CVs from you all as well.
Before we conclude the session today, let's capture a memorable moment together. So I invite all the participants to turn on their cameras so we can take a group photo. So please do switch on your cameras to capture this special moment. And the virtual background is in the chat box. You can download it from there and put it into your virtual background.
Recording stopped.
Come on, guys. Let's take the group photo now and switch on the cameras for that.
I think there are about 5 of us now.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people running away. I think they're very shy.
Yeah.
They're leaving the meeting.
Let's wait about for a minute or so. All right, then let's take the group photo in 5 seconds. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So can a member of 𝗪𝗔 take the photo? Now. All right. Seems like we have taken the photo. Thank you all. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you too, sir. Bye, sir. This is to all the participants. Thank you for actively engaging this career guidance session. Your participation has made this event truly meaningful. We hope you found this session beneficial in shaping your career paths and enhancing your professional journeys. As we conclude this session, we encourage you to apply the knowledge and the tips you have gained today to build an impressive CVs and optimize your LinkedIn profiles. And in the upcoming session from the Career Fest, you will have the opportunity to face mock interviews, and 99X will help you to develop your CVs for your future interviews. This session will be also held on 17th at the 𝗧𝗃 expert premises. So build your CVs now and make sure they are strong as possible. Today, thank you once again for joining us at the Career Fest. We wish you the best in the future endeavors. Stay motivated, keep learning, seize the opportunities that come your way. Have a wonderful day. I am 𝗬𝗂𝗶𝗵𝗸𝗲𝗃, signing off as your moderator for today's event. Thank you.